Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Diversion Authority Finance Committee meeting for January 26, 2022. Welcome you all. The first order of business is to call the roll, please. Don?
Mayor Durdes.
Here.
Dr. Mahoney.
Here.
Mr. Peterson.
I am here.
Mr. Jacobson.
Here.
Mr. Costin.
Here.
Ms. Johnson.
Here.
Mr. Redlinger.
Here.
Mr. Steen.
Here.
Mr. Pepcorn. Mayor Carlson. Mr. Reeds. Ms. Madriga. Here. Quorum is present.
Thank you, Don. Item number 2 is to approve the minutes of December 15th.
Move to approve.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Commissioner Steen. It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes as distributed for the December 15th diversion meeting. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Item number 3 is to approve the minutes of the January 3rd, 2022 special meeting.
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Steen. Is there a second, please?
Peterson, second.
Thank you, Commissioner Peterson. It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of the January 3rd, 2022 special meeting. It is an attachment. It has been distributed. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carried. Item number 4 is to approve the order of the agenda.
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Steen. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Mr. Costin seconds. It's been moved and seconded to approve the order of the agenda as distributed. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item number 5 is the selection of the Metro Flood Diversion Authority Finance Committee Chairman and Vice Chairman for 2022.
Mr. Chair.
Are there any nominations? Mr.
Chair,
Steen.
I would nominate Mr. Bernie Dardis as chair.
Can you do the vice chair too at the same time?
Be fine. Yep.
Are you going to be around next year?
What's that?
Are you going to be around next year?
Yes.
Oh, okay. And I nominate Rick Steen as vice chair.
We have a motion of nominations of Bernie Dardis as the Finance Committee Chair for 2022 and Commissioner Rick Steen as Vice Chair for 2022. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Peterson seconds. Been moved and seconded for nominations of the Finance Committee Chair of Bernie Dardis and Vice Chair Commissioner Rick Steen. Are there any other nominations?
Mr. Mayor,
Commissioner Peterson.
I'd make a motion to cease nominations and cast unanimous ballot.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor of a unanimous ballot, that's not a discussion item. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried.
Mr. Chairman,
Mayor.
by you accepting this position, I would assume that means you're going to run for mayor in West Fargo?
I still have
Second.
6 months under my term before that's over.
I second, Mr. Chairman. Second.
Thank you. You're out of order, Mayor Mahoney. Item number 6 is the approval of the bills. Mr. Costin, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. On the list, there's $8,095,929 worth of bills. You'll recognize all the vendors as past vendors, so you'll be familiar with no unusual items, so I'd ask for approval of the bills.
Thank you, sir. Are there any questions for Mr. Costin?
I'll move to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Steen. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Mayor Mahoney seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the bills as presented by Mr. Costin. Is there any discussion? Don, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Durdes.
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney.
Aye.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson.
Yes.
Mr. Costin.
Yes.
Ms. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger.
Yes.
Mr. Steen.
Yes.
Ms. Madriga.
Yes.
That is everyone.
Thank you, Don. Item number 7 is the finance report. Again, we'll call on Mr. Costin, City of Fargo.
Yes, on page 22 of 364, the spend for the 2021 fiscal year is $126,947,321. in approximate middle of the page, and over to the right, the grand total for the project life to date is $773,491,535. If you move onward to page 23 on with regard to your balance sheet, significant assets are available, $97,642,348, and a balance remaining in the administrative budget fund of $192,920. So things are working as intended as it flows through the master indenture of trust. So, and then on the next page, I wasn't sure if I was supposed to cover this or if this was going to be a Jacobs thing. We talked about eliminating this report format here. This is a carryover that's been in the packet for a long time. The issue with regard to why we'd want to reduce it is the encumbrances that we currently have are multi-year encumbrances. They can be in the millions of dollars. And so at the time we drafted this report, it was intended to be kind of an annual snapshot of the activity. Much of this is duplicated and replicated in the executive director's financial report. So we would recommend discontinuing this report for fiscal year 2022. We've had discussions with Jacobs, and they're going to incorporate the revenue portion of the report into the executive director's report, so it's all in one concise packet.
Thank you, Mr. Costin. Are there any questions with regard to that? Mayor Mahoney.
Mr. Chairman, Ken, I'm just a little curious. We recently got an award from the government worth $137 million. That won't be in this report, right? Whatever the Corps spends and does on its budget, we don't see?
Yeah, that's correct. That activity is accounted for by the Army Corps separately.
So basically, what all we track is the money that's local and state?
That's my understanding.
Is the P3 also, is that a part of that as too? As the P3 goes through money, is that reflected in our accounting?
The P3 money will flow through this when we start making payments during the life of the construction. And that starts in 2023, I think, somewhere there. Those are very large payments, and we'll draw funds out of the WIFIA loan to fund those P3 payments as they come due. And those are, I believe, going to be monthly payments.
I'd call on Mr. Shockley. Do you have any other comments on that?
No, Kent answered it perfectly.
Okay.
So just one thing, John and Kent, is that the state has a certain amount of money we deposited in the state of North Dakota bank, right? And is that reflected in your accounting, or is that just money that sits there until we utilize it?
I'm under the understanding that the state is holding on to their own money until such time as they transfer it to the Bank of North Dakota when we make a reimbursement request. That's a little bit different than what we thought was going to happen, that we thought perhaps we'd issue bonds, forward the money, and let us hold it in our fund balance. But maybe John can go into that in a little bit of a detail, because there's coordination between the state, who has the money, and the Bank of North Dakota, that's the trustee that actually disperses funds.
Mr. Shockley, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Originally, as Kent had indicated, originally we thought that the state was going to bond and then just wire us the funds. And then early on, we had reached out before the state had committed to bonding, explained how our understanding, and then we didn't hear anything from the state for quite a while. And then they had sent a form to us recently that they want us to compile invoices that we paid or to be paid and submit that to the state, and then they'll reimburse us. It's not a cost share like the current State Water Commission, but it's a little different than what we had contemplated. And so we recently had a coordination call with myself, the fiscal agent, and Jacobs regarding the payment process. And I'm working through clarifying that, but what I would envision is that the invoices that the authority pays, I'll use, for example, the Cass County Joint Water Resource District invoice, because that's probably the easiest. We pay that, we attach it to a request for payment. It gets sent in by the fiscal agent. The Bank of North Dakota trustee, who's a trustee under the legacy bonds, cuts a check, walks that down to the hall to our trustee, the Bank of North Dakota, who runs it through the indenture trust, and then the money gets wired to the fiscal agent. And so there's an additional like layer of, there's going to be a lot of transfers, but I think that's how it's going to work. So
I wanted to comment too. I'm rather disappointed in the level of detail that we're having to provide invoice level detail for every single transaction. That's disappointing to me. This is just like filing with FEMA. FEMA requires invoices for everything. Not that that's an insurmountable task, but the State Water Commission, we simply run a report off of our system, submit the report, and they remit the money. So it's a little different protocol and a little deeper in the weeds, if you will, with regard to documentation. But I'm not complaining. I'm just sharing that with you because we, as fiscal agent, will package those requests and get those off. And Jacobs as well has those documents in their ACONX system. So we'll work out a protocol. I just thought it was going to be a more streamlined process because think about it, when we get 70, 80, $90 million requests, that better fly through the system at warp speed because, you know, we don't have that deep of pockets.
Mayor Mahoney.
Mr. Chairman, could you talk to the treasurer about that? He was always about simplifying things. Wouldn't we be able to visit with him and perhaps figure this out?
One would think.
well,
We'll leave that up to Mr. Shockley's advice.
what I can tell you, Mayor Mahoney, and that's a great question. I attempted to intervene in the process ahead of time so that we could have a discussion about our reimbursements, because being the single largest recipient of the state bond proceeds, I thought before they set up the documents that we could just have a call with the fiscal agent and Jacobs and get everybody in the same room, how it would work. Rather than do that, they've already signed all the bond documents and the reimbursement agreement and everything. So it's there's already written agreements in place between the trustee and the bondholders, and so I don't know if we can unravel that. It wasn't for lack of trying early on, because that was my whole concern, is that we wanted to keep it simple with, and I don't think that, you know, nobody's used to dealing with a project our size. I don't think they realize, as Kent pointed out, the volume of invoices you'll get at $90 million. I mean, they're just a lot of paper even, but.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Please, Mr. Paulson.
Mr. Shockley is exactly correct. And in fact, Mr. Shockley shared with me once that if he were to write a book about this project, it would be called Underestimate. And this is obviously a case where the state has underestimated the amount of administrative burden to deal with the situation. And perhaps it's worth a discussion with folks at the state just to try to raise some awareness so that they understand what they've set up and how burdensome it could potentially be. But my fear is exactly what Mr. Costin had mentioned, that we are not able to make the payments to the P3 developer in a timely manner, which causes damages to the developer that the diversion would bear. So,
And probably a breach of the contract that we have with the Red River Alliance.
that's correct, Mr.
That's a
Chair.
critical point. Mr. Costin, thank you for your insight on that. Please, Mr. Peterson.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. In regard to what I've learned over my years in Bismarck, I've always tried to attach fiscal notes to things. And I realize the dialogue's already transpired, so there's only so much we can do. I hear you, Mr. Shockley, but in the same breath, it would be interesting to see what they would say if we had a reaction or a response that would actually quantify the level of work, and you say it's going to cost us X amount of time, it's going to cost you X amount of time, it's compounding over, and I'm sure this was part of the dialogue when you first met with him, Mr. Shockley. But if you can get that sort of tidal wave of activity that's going to need to transpire to process these massive applications, it might help tell the story a little bit better, because people can quantify dollar figures no matter what you do, whether you're a mechanic or you're an accountant. But if you just say it's a bunch of work, well, that's your job, and you love being an accountant, so you're lucky, you're welcome, right? Whereas if we come to them and say it's going to cost us this, and obviously this money can be put towards the project, something else, whatever it may be more prudent for us to do that rather than allocate it toward administrative costs. So that's what I'd suggest if we're going to open that dialogue.
And I would say that I am trying to take one more run at this process, because I've been assured by North Dakota PFA that was doing the bonding, is that we'd have a quick turnaround on the payments, but I'm just not sure that they contemplate the the level of detail in the invoices. So I'm going to try to take one more run at that, and perhaps it's just a certification from the fiscal agent and a run of the payments that have been made. We're going to try. We're going to give it a try. It's worth giving it a shot one more time.
John, I had one other recommendation with regard to protocol. It seems logical that when we get to be making these very large payments, multi-million-dollar payments, they should pay upon delivery. They should pay the same day that we delivered the request. And we can forward those invoices, and if it takes them 3 or 4 days or 5 days to go through a whole pile of invoices, so be it. Just do a right of offset against the next request and keep a rolling forward tabulation of where we're at, because that money needs to move, and it needs to move quickly.
Thank you, Mr. Costin. We'll take that under advisement, and then obviously Mr. Shockley and Mr. Paulson will be working on that. So are there any additional questions of Mr. Costin on his finance report? Okay. Keep in mind, Mr. Costin had 2 recommendations along with the finance report. So at this time, we'll do a roll call vote on accepting that report. Don, would you please call the roll? With the recommendations. Yes?
Dr. Mahoney.
Aye.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson.
Yes.
Mr. Costin.
Yes.
Ms. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger.
Yes.
Mr. Steen.
Yes.
Ms. Madriga.
Yes.
That is everyone.
Thank you, Don. Item number 8 is the Executive Director's Financial Report. Mr. Paulson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, member of the Finance Committee. And I'm glad you all approved the last action, because we've already taken care of one of the recommendations right here on this sheet. So this is the annual revenue status that we put together for this month. This is a new format. It is intended to remove what Mr. Costin had mentioned under his report. And so you can see here we have 3 columns. This is as of December 31st. So we have the 2021 approved budget, the expected revenue from the expected sources, and then we have the current month, which would be December of 2021, and then the fiscal year to date. So for example, you can see the City of Fargo sales tax was estimated in the budget to have 32 million in revenue, and we came a bit above what the expected budgeted revenue was for the year. Likewise with the Cass County sales tax. And then you can see the other major components would be the state of North Dakota with the 50% cost share. And then keep in mind that the approved revenue budget here is consistent with the cash budget that was approved in 2021. And as I get into the rest of my fiscal report, as I have mentioned the last few months, we ran significantly below budget last year due to the delay of the procurement of the P3 developer and the anticipated acquisition of lands, and then the ramp up now as we begin to coordinate with the developer was all expected to occur in 2021. So overall, I think we managed the budgets very well, but it is a bit inconsistent with what was anticipated in 2020 when we put the cash budget together. So overall, the revenue sources were very good last year. Obviously, no concerns with the sales tax revenue. It continues to come in as anticipated. And just a side note, I think I've seen a number of great bits of information here lately, both produced by the state and by local entities that are forecasting growth above average currently and in the near future. So we do not have any current concerns for 22 for the sales tax revenue either. So certainly open to any comments on this. Just reach out to me. We can format this differently, but I think this is consistent with what the committee was looking for, as well as consistent with the remainder of my financial report. So
Could you address the sale of assets line item, please?
Yeah, so that would be right there in the sale of assets under the reimbursements. So that would be the sale of property. Right below it would be our rental income received from the properties that we do own. Paul will have to help me with the miscellaneous. I'm not sure what was contemplated in 2020 for the miscellaneous category, but we were pretty far below that. I don't know if that was some short-term financing that just wasn't completed because it wasn't necessary. And then, as Mayor Mahoney had mentioned, the next report then will include or could include, a line item for the state or Bank of North Dakota, the bonding dollars that were received that will be treated a bit differently than the 50% match, and we'll indicate that in the next report where we would have that to report out. So,
Thank you, Mr. Paulson. Are there any questions for Mr. Paulson?
I do have a bit more, Mayor Dardis, just for the cost side of things too. And this is the typical cost summary. So very similar to what you've seen in the past. Consistent with what Mr. Costin reported, we have actual expenditures to date of $773 million for the overall project. Again, you can compare the annual cash budget to the to what was the reality of the cash budget for 21. So significantly below, and again, that was due to timing. I'll move forward onto the level 2 detail. I just want to make a note, under the level 1 detail, there was no inconsistencies. None of our overall items were over budget. On the level 2 detail here, we had one area that was over budget. It was related to the impact of lands in when they were acquired. And if you scroll down, Paul will show that on the next page here.
Down one more. Yep.
Right here under, sorry, oh, yep, that page number 2, Paul, there.
There it is, yeah.
Under diversion channel and associated infrastructure, we had a $8 million cash budget, and it came in at $18 million. That was all related to the timing of the acquisition of the lands and the delay in the procurement. And so there were overall program budget wide, it had no impact. But when we look at a year-over-year budget, it indicated that we were over budget on that item. Other than that, all level 2 detail items were under budget for the year, consistent with the delay in the procurement. So no concerns there. Certainly open to any comments or questions that the committee has.
Questions for Mr. Paulson? I have a question maybe for Mr. Shockley or possibly Mr. Paulson or Mr. Barthol. With what the concerns that Mr. Costin's brought up, is there any possibility that the diversion board will have to act on some of these risks and assign that to some of the contingencies that we have in place in 2022 as we're spending a lot more money? Is that any concern of anyone else?
Mayor Dardis, that is a great question, and I'm actually going to cover some of that in just a little bit. But I'll answer it, for the sake of discussion too. Yes, we are encompassing those risks and the risk of a compensation event with the developer. And I'll talk a little bit more in depth here on the later item here, but we use that risk to determine and run what we believe is statistically probable, and that's how we determine where our contingency should or should not be. And that is currently going on right now. I'll explain in more detail later on in the committee meeting here.
Okay. Anything else on your financial report, Mr. Paulson?
No, sir.
Well, that is for informational only. That's not an actionable item. So we'll move on to item number 9, which is the contracting actions. And again, we call on Mr. Paulson. This is a non-actionable item and for information only.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this month, surprisingly, I have nothing to have before the Finance Committee for approval. And I have no report outs on any cash budget requests for change. So.
Very good. Thank you.
Yep.
Item number 10 is other business. And the first is the financial plan schedule update. We'll call on Paul and Joel.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is a continuation of our discussion we were just having. I want to kind of go through the steps that we'll go through over the course of the next couple months in relation to the overall financial plan for the program. And this really relates to that big number that keeps being bounced around in the media and in other outlets. What is the cost of this program? And the last time we went through this in 2018, the financial plan indicated a total capital expenditure of $2.75 billion. Obviously, we've seen inflation due to materials and other things as we fast forward another 4 years here. We feel it's appropriate at this point in the program's progress to do another financial plan update. We've had significant changes over the course of the next year, or last year, including the state bonding dollars that we received, the federal dollars, as well as the closing of the P3 project agreement. All of those things significantly changed a number of large risk items that we had been considering within our financial plan that has impacts on our contingency, as Mayor Dardis had brought up previously. So over the course of the last couple of weeks, we as a team have been having internal risk management sessions where we've been going through every risk imaginable, including a compensation event due to a delay in process or procedure, as Mayor Dardis had mentioned. We feel that we've run the gamut of possibilities, and so this week right now we are assessing those, and what will happen next is we will include those risks into a probability analysis, and that probability analysis will help to give Ernst & Young that financial impact to the overall program, and they'll then include that into our overall financial plan, which includes the closing and the locking in of the WIFIA loan and all the other financing that we did last year, as well as the P3 developer bid that was received. So we have a lot of cost certainty now. This is the time to do this financial plan update. That'll happen sometime at the end of February. After that, if we're comfortable with the contingency amounts and as they fit with the financial plan, we'll include those in the overall program budget, and we'll bring that forward, and we intend to reveal that financial plan at the March meeting. So that's our expected time frame right now. Obviously, I think we expect the cost to increase some, but we're not seeing any major significant problems anywhere, and obviously we wouldn't have recommended approving the project agreement with the P3 developer if we had any significant concerns. But this is going to give us that new number that will be accurate to all accounts according to our processes and procedures and how we came up with those and analyze all the risks and incorporated in all of the different activities that occurred over the course of the last few years as far as financing. So just an update for the committee, no action to be taken. I just wanted to make sure everyone was comfortable with the process we're taking and the schedule moving forward.
Any questions, Mr. Paulson?
I did have a curiosity question with regard to compensation events to the P3 developer. Are any of those a part of your risk assessment and then incorporated into your insurance coverage? So in other words, is there any potential that a triggering event would trigger an insurance settlement that would mitigate the risk of out-of-pocket payments from us?
I can tell you, Mr. Costin, the answer is yes, but I'm going to defer to Mr. Shockley, who is also our lead on all things insurance related. So.
Yeah, so on the insurance subject, some compensation event claims could be insurance events. And so there is a complex insurance regime set forth in the project agreement that's required for the developer to carry. And so the answer is yes, but it would depend upon what the claim is. I'll use a worst case scenario. If we had a a significant flood during construction, that would not be something that we could insure against. Builders all risk generally doesn't insure against an event like that. But for example, if a third party, they're putting on an interstate bridge and somebody was negligent, and we can talk all sorts of hypotheticals, but they drive a truck full of gasoline over the side and it blows up and takes the bridge out, and there is negligence, then there would be recovery from the insurance. On the financial side, we have within the financial plan, we have accounted for what I would term as financeability if there's a compensation event. So we took a measure of what we predicted the maximum probable compensation events would be, and then we included within the finance plan the ability to finance those compensation events. Those would, of course, have to come out of unexpended contingency, and so there would be a lot of decisions for those types of events. But what I would say is, if there's a flood during construction, a serious one, that would, devastate the community, that is a kind of a different type of an event that we may not have insurance coverage for.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item is the 2021 financial audit. Again, Joel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we are working with Eide Bailey to scope out the 2021 financial audit. And this year, we're also going to have them prepare the financial statements as well, which was traditionally something done by the City of Fargo. But as we move forward, that's something that will move over to the DA. So just wanted to make the committee aware that we've engaged Eide Bailey, and we intend to bring a project contract forward for consideration at the next meeting and get rolling on that. So I don't know, John, if you had anything. That's okay.
Any questions from Mr. Paulson on that? All right. Item C, Diversion Authority Board approval of the MOUs and agreement actions. John? Mr. Shockley?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have a lot of MOUs and MERS this afternoon, it's been a busy 30 days since our last meeting, but it's been very positive developments as we're getting all of these MOUs checked off regarding the diversion channel. Really, and what I can report is the only remaining MOU on the diversion channel is with Moorhead Public Service, and I think we're getting close on that MOU. And we also did receive one comment back from North Dakota DOT that we're working through on that MOU, which we had anticipated that the parties had agreed to, but I would consider it a technical working comment that we just have to clarify. So the MOUs you have before you, the first one is between the City of Mapleton and the Diversion Authority. Just at a very high level, Mapleton is running a sewer force main from the City of Mapleton to the City of West Fargo to provide sewer capacity to the City of Mapleton as it grows. Ultimately, that will connect up to the City of Fargo. It goes through the City of West Fargo system and then over to the City of Fargo. But this really addresses, this MOU addresses that construction of that portion of the project, and it really transfers all of those items over to the developer. This was contemplated in the technical requirements, so this isn't a new addition. This is just took some additional time to get the MOU completed with the City of Mapleton. The next MOU is with Mapleton Township and the Diversion Authority. This is very similar to the other MOUs that we completed with the other townships, and that provides reimbursement for construction expenses up to $3,000 annually. After the project's substantially complete, $1,500 per year, and that would be for signs or damage or things that occur as a result of the project. And a one-time lost tax revenue payment of $90,000 and $18,000 for attorney's fees. I would note, just for everybody's knowledge, as the diversion channel components are completed and no longer rented out to the farming community, the intent is to make those non-taxable parcels. And that is why we have this one-time lost tax revenue payment, because we don't want to be responsible for making tax payments through the bottom of a channel in perpetuity. If you could proceed to the next slide. The next MOU is with the Rush River Water Resource District. This is a smaller water resource district that is a part of the Cass County Joint Water Resource District. This is to cover specific approvals and preliminary work related to the Rush River and Lower Rush River. It is very similar to the other MOUs, but it just allows for that permitting and the submission of invoices. Once again, this was contemplated in the P3 project agreement. We are just working to finalize it. The next MOU was a long drawn out negotiations, but we reached the finish line, and that is with Magellan Pipeline. And that has to deal with running a gas pipeline underneath the diversion channel. So as you can imagine, anytime you deal with a gas pipeline company, they have concerns about making sure the pipe will continue operations. And so creating bypasses, reroutes, and concerns about boring and other boring underneath the channel kind of dominated the discussions. And so that MOU took a little bit longer. The estimated cost to the authority for this portion of it is $2,479,000. That was included in the project budget. The next MOU is with Ottertail Power Company and the Diversion Authority. This is for relocation of their electric lines that cross the diversion channel. There are a number of places that the line crosses the channel. As you can imagine, with 30 miles of channel, we cross a lot of different right away. This utility relocation project is already included in the P3 developer agreement, and so that was included with the bid from the P3 team. The next one is a MURA, and that is between Sprint Communications and the Diversion Authority. And recall that the MURAs cover utility relocations in the southern embankment. We've been making excellent progress with negotiating with all the utilities that are located in the area. And because we didn't quite know what the projects would ultimately look like from the Army Corps of Engineers, recall that the process with the Army Corps of Engineers process is slightly different, where they use the traditional process. They actually design the entire project, then bid it out, and the utility relocates come with that. So we devised the process where we enter into an MOU with the utility company that sets forth all the terms and conditions. And then every time we need to do a utility relocate, we do essentially a task order with the company. And it works very efficiently because then we can identify specifically where the utility needs to be relocated and that we're not constantly renegotiating agreements or creating new agreements. And so it's a very efficient way to handle all the different various utility relocations in the UMA. And to be quite frank, with the size and scope of the UMA, it's more efficient because you may have different utilities that we're not aware of, or even that the utility company may not have full awareness of in that area. The next is between the City of Fargo and the Diversion Authority. The City of Fargo has a sewer pipe sewer main that runs down to the City of Oxbow. And this is a giant force main, and this just covers that force main. As it goes through the southern embankment, there are certain requirements. It's very straightforward. It involves the relocation of the pipeline, and the authority is going to pay all the reasonable costs of the utility relocation project, excluding the utility's internal costs. So the authority will take the lead in relocating it and designing it and constructing it. And ultimately, if there are betterments, which I don't think there will be betterments, but if there were, then it would be the responsibility of the City of Fargo. And a betterment would be, for example, if it's a 48-inch pipe now and you wanted to make it a 60-inch pipe, the difference between the 48-inch pipe and a 60-inch pipe would be the betterment. I think, do you want to advance? I think might be one. Nope, that is it. So I can certainly answer any questions that you might have about the MOUs or the MRAs that we have before the Finance Committee and ultimately the Diversion Authority tomorrow. But it has been a very productive last 30 days, and we're starting to get most all of the MOUs and MRAs buttoned up. There are a few on the Minnesota side for utilities that we're working through, kind of tracking along how the project is being constructed. So,
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Questions? Mayor Mahoney?
Oxbow said they're discussing specials now. Is that to pay the sewer hookup?
this would not impact their cost. I don't know if they're working on a different project where they're
Must be a
paying.
different project. I was just
Yeah.
surprised you finally say we're getting special assessments out in Oxbow. We're getting just like West Fargo. So I just was wondering.
Yeah, they may be charging for the actual hookup, but this project of just relocating the line is being paid for out of the authority project cost.
Mayor Mahoney moved to approve the MOU agreement actions as outlined by Mr. Shockley, items 1 through 7. Is there a second?
Peterson, second.
Thank you, Commissioner Peterson. Been moved and seconded to approve the board actions, MOUs, and agreement actions as presented by Mr. Shockley. Don, would you please call a roll?
Mayor Dardis.
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney.
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson.
Yes.
Mr. Costin.
Yes.
Ms. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger.
Yes.
Mr. Steen. Ms. Madriga. That is everyone.
Thank you, Don. The next order of business is the discussion of a resolution establishing the administrative fee policy for in-kind construction work. Mr. Shockley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So before the Finance Committee, you have a relatively simple resolution setting a policy by the Diversion Authority regarding reimbursement of any administrative fees for in-kind construction work performed by member entities. And so this is really the background. This is the first time that the Diversion Authority has considered a policy. And this is one of those items regarding what I would characterize as a cleanup of past action. And so what was agreed with leadership in different meetings was that any administrative fee that had been submitted previously up for work that was completed through 2021, specifically relating to Fargo, would be paid, but that would be capped at 3%. My understanding is there's still a few invoices for work that was undertaken in 2021, but because of the invoice submitting process, it may be February before you get the last invoice from last year. And so I've handed out the resolution with the red line, just making it clear that it applies for work and costs incurred prior to December 31st of 2021. And then the policy is very simple going forward. For any work or costs incurred after January 1st of 2022, there would be no administrative fee, and that would apply to all of the member entities.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Questions?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Steen.
I'll move to approve the resolution as presented.
Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Peterson seconds. It's been moved and seconded to approve the resolution establishing administrative fee policy for in-kind construction work as presented by Mr. Shockley today. Don, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Dardis.
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney.
Aye.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson. Mr. Costin.
Yes.
Ms. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger.
Yes.
Mr. Steen.
Yes.
Ms. Madriga.
Yes.
That is everyone.
Thank you, Don. Item E is the resolution approving the procedure for requesting that the City of Fargo undertake development of comprehensive project in-kind work elements and authorizing the reimbursement of such development costs and expenses. Again, Mr. Shockley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is a resolution that we've been working on for a little bit that really sets forth the specific procedures for requesting the city of Fargo, and you'll see this with some of the other member entities, that they undertake comprehensive project in-kind elements. So when the diversion authority requests go ahead and construct this lift station or this levee, we wanted to codify some type of procedure and how we would authorize that reimbursement and of those costs and expenses. So it's pretty straightforward. This has been run through the engineering staffs of both the Diversion Authority and the City of Fargo, and it's also been run through the legal from the City of Fargo and my office and myself. And then our intent is that you'll see almost identical resolutions for the other member entities coming forward. But because Fargo has been constructing the bulk of the in-kind work up until this point, we thought it would be important to start with the City of Fargo first and then basically cut and paste the other member entities into this similar resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Questions? Mayor Mahoney.
John, would this have a process or something that clarifies where there's confusion? Basically, you are going to figure out something where it won't be confusing for anybody as far as that type of reimbursement. Is that correct?
Correct. It was to clarify the procedures, and for clarity, this does not cover reimbursement of operations and maintenance costs. We're going to address that as we are working through developing our operations and maintenance budget, because there's some complex engineering issues. I'll use an example of if there's a lift station that has a very large pump for the diversion for when it gets above 37 feet and a smaller pump for normal stormwater events, we probably need to figure it out whose share for what, because Fargo is probably using the smaller pump for the normal storm events, but the larger pump. And so there's just some technical issues we need to work out on the operations and maintenance.
Additional questions?
Move to approve.
Thank you, Mayor Mahoney. Is there a second, please?
Steen, second.
Commissioner Steen, second. It's been moved and seconded to approve the procedure for requesting that the City of Fargo undertake development and comprehensive project in-kind work elements. Don, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Dardis.
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney.
Aye.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson.
Yes.
Mr. Costin.
Yes.
Ms. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger.
Yes.
Steen.
Yes.
Ms. Madriga.
Yes.
That is everyone.
Thank you. Next order of business is item F, and that's a recommendation to accept bids and award. Mr. Shockley, are you on this one also? Or Mr. Bakagard?
I can certainly jump in. We open bids, so this is for property structure mitigation. We open bids for the project, and this involves the removal of some homes and some other structures as part of the project. We opened bids, and the apparent low bidder was Schmidt & Sons Construction at $224,900. I believe that the engineer's estimate was in the neighborhood of about $720, sorry.
Great bidding.
Well, and it's, I think the reason that Schmidt & Sons is able to be so competitive is that they are recycling the homes. So they take them and sell the homes. And most of their bid, when we look closely at the bids, was really due to the taking out the foundation and the reseeding. And because we wanted to verify to make sure that they weren't just giving a really low bid and not able to perform the rest of the work. And their estimate in that area for the removal of the soil was consistent with the engineer's estimate. And so we weren't concerned that there was, that they wouldn't be able to perform. So the recommendation is to award Schmidt & Sons Construction Incorporated for their apparent low bid of $224,975 with the, on the contingency that they provide the appropriate performance and payment bonds and insurance, which they've actually sitting in my inbox to review today. So,
Are there any questions for Mr. Shockley?
Move to approve.
Thank you, Mayor Mahoney. Is there a second, please?
Peterson, second.
Thank you, Commissioner Peterson. It's been moved and seconded to approve the recommendation to accept the bid from Schmidt & Sons for the removal of homes for $224,900.75. Don, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Dardis.
Yes?
Dr. Mahoney.
Aye.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson. Mr. Costin.
Yes.
Ms. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger.
Yes.
Mr. Steen.
Yes.
Ms. Madriga.
Yes.
Ayes have one.
Thank you, Don. Our next meeting will be February 23rd, 2022. Before we move on, I have a comment that I'd like to make and some thank yous that I'd like to extend. As we've continued to meet with going forward for the 2022 and the finances and the like, I want to compliment staff, Mr. Paulson, Mr. Bakkegaard, Mr. Martinson, Mr. Shockley, certainly in the role that he plays, as well as Mr. Barthol. We have been asking for new dashboards with regard to the finances. My goal has always been that anybody that's not on the finance committee could look at a couple of dashboards and it would tell the story of where we're at for expenditures and the like. And I'm holding a couple of those reports in my hand right now, and they're phenomenal. They really, truly are, that you don't have to be a member of the finance committee and dig deep into level 1 and level 2 and level 3. So my compliments, Paul. You've led that effort in a kind of a public information forum for those of the board members that were interested. I am extremely grateful, and I'm thankful that you've executed that way beyond my expectations. So thank you for that, sir. Appreciate it very much. With that, we stand adjourned. Not taking any motions about that.